Everyone, welcome to the webinar today. ICD-10 is real, answers to your ICD-10 queries. We definitely appreciate the questions that you submitted related to the ICD-10 coding and implementation. And today I'll be happy to address those questions, but keep in mind I'm only answering questions that were submitted related to ICD-10. And if you send a question in today, I probably won't be able to answer that question because it was kind of short notice. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we are now 13 days post ICD-10 implementation, and by now you should be well aware of the huge expanses of codes that are available to you now. Moving from 14,000 to nearly 70,000 codes may feel a bit overwhelming, and hopefully everyone by now has a basic knowledge of the official guidelines, the coding structure, and coding conventions. And combining this basic knowledge and practice, you're sure to become an ICD-10 expert in time. So now let's get right into your questions. The first question is, what is the proper ICD-10 code for osteoarthritis of the knee or arthritis of the knee, not further specified? Well, for this you will code M17.9, osteoarthritis of the knee unspecified. Now here's why. Regardless of the reason for the visit, code selection has to be based on clear documentation in your medical record. You'll look up a code the same manner in which you've looked up codes in ICD-9. That hasn't changed. So first locate the main term in the alphabetic index, which in this case would be osteoarthritis. Search further to find the knee as a subterm. Then the code beside the term is going to be your default code, M17.9. You'll then verify the code in your tabular list, including any laterality or any applicable seventh character. And then the alphabetic index is not going to usually provide you with your full code, so you'll never code directly from the alphabetic index, and that hasn't changed. You'll need to be sure to review instructional notes that are located in both the alphabetic index and the tabular list for complete and optimal code assignment. Now there are notes related to this category of M15 to M19, and there's an excludes to note for osteoarthritis of the spine. And there's also an includes note for the category of arthropathies M00 to M25. And this includes disorders affecting predominantly peripheral limb joints. So since the documentation didn't provide you any further details, you have to go with the code M17.9. Let's move on to the next question. Our wound clinic treats patients with pressure ulcers. How can we improve our documentation so that I will not have to rely on unspecified diagnosis codes? Now this is a good question. You'll find that there are specific documentation requirements for pressure ulcers located in your guidelines. The documentation should include 3 key pieces of information: the site, stage, and presence of gangrene. Now let's take a closer look at pressure ulcer documentation requirements. Documentation of pressure ulcers will need specific details to be included in the provider documentation. Now you can find the codes for pressure ulcers in Chapter 12, Diseases of the Skin and Subcutaneous Tissue. Make sure that the site of the pressure ulcer is documented. The documentation should indicate if the pressure ulcer is present, let's say, in the patient's heels, hips, buttocks, or another location. The stage is also very important. Code selection will hinge on this detail as well. If the stage isn't documented, you must query your provider. Only select an unspecified code as your last result. And in addition to the stage and site, your provider must also document if gangrene is present in the patient. Now let's take a look at specific documentation rules for pressure ulcer stages. Someone who is not the patient's provider, such as another provider or qualified practitioner legally accountable for establishing the patient's diagnosis, can document a patient's pressure ulcer stage. Now you can use this information as long as the patient's provider also documents the associated diagnosis, which will be the pressure ulcer. Often a nurse may document in the note the pressure ulcer stages. So let's continue. I'm trying to figure out if there's any rhyme or reason to the characters of the ICD-10 code. Is there some kind of legend or cheat sheet which will tell me what each letter represents? Also, some of the codes have an X in the code. Will this cause a denial, or are X codes billable?